So I wanted to give my 2 cents about what's going on here in the United States. First, I wanted to touch on this. Amongst some of the people, at least that I hang out with over the last several months, there's been this discussion about an evolution in consciousness, an improvement, if you will, on the way we look at ourselves and the way we look at our world, which seemed like almost like an ideal where everything was going to be paradise and improved and so on, and maybe it is. Maybe when we're all said and done here, that will be the case. For right now, I think that we're seeing that this shift, this evolution, is painful. It hurts. And maybe it's similar to going through birth. Everybody wants the baby, but when it's time for the baby to be born, maybe it's not as pleasant as we'd like it to be. So, first, my thoughts on race are my thoughts on how we hurt ourselves as a society, as a human race, when we hold each other down, when we restrict our ability to be all that we can be, when we don't allow people to go to school, or we restrict access to them improving themselves, we're actually negatively impacting our world's ability to improve itself. It's what's the ask not for whom the bell tolls, right? It tolls for thee. So this all of us are being affected. All of us have been affected. Every time that a person's potential is left untapped, it is something that costs all of us, right? I mean, how many Einsteins or Madame Curies or Robin Williams or fill in the blank have we been denied because we've spent so much time and energy on keeping each other in place, not allowing ourselves to shine. We're all paying the price for that. As I watched that video, that horrifying video of George Floyd, as he was executed. And originally, I thought it was a single officer doing the execution and one officer protecting him from the crowd so that he could perform the execution. As their images come out from different angles, you see, or I saw, there were actually 2 additional police officers holding Mr. Floyd's body in place so the kneeling officer could perform the execution. What I notice is there's no emotion. There's no emotion by him. There's no emotion by the officer or from the officer that's protecting this criminal act. When the other officers arrive on the scene, there's no reaction. There's nothing to indicate that they're shocked at what they're seeing. The supposed ambulance and supposed paramedics, I say supposed because usually paramedics, the first thing they do is check someone's vitals. They didn't do that. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the guy was already dead. They didn't pronounce him dead until the hospital. I'm sure that there's a reason why that would be the wise thing to do. But it's possible that if they had performed CPR or gotten him on oxygen, that he might have lived. But they chose not to do that. Now, I have picked up somewhere that they all had body cams. They all had body cams, and yet they had no fear, no compunction to think, uh-oh, this is going to be reviewed. I believe that it means that those body cams are a little bit of a scam of themselves. They're either not being reviewed, or it is standard practice to be able to delete them, or oops, I forgot to turn it on, or whatever the thing is, so that there's no real, nobody's being held responsible for their actions on camera. So as I think about it, it reminds me of an experience I had several years ago when I, acting as an interpreter, called the IRS for a friend. And she was there and I was interpreting, and had one of the most horrendous, in fact, I'll say it was the absolute worst experience that I've ever had speaking to someone for any reason over the phone. The person that I dealt with was angry, they were rude, they were impatient, just made it a horrible, horrible experience. We did resolve the issue and we were eventually able to finish. It took a lot longer than it needed to be, and it was much, much less pleasant than it needed to be. Now, about 2 years ago, I had to call the IRS myself. And I dreaded it, but it had to be done. So imagine my surprise when I got a hold of someone that was intelligent, well-spoken, they were kind, they were intuitive, they knew what I meant, even though I didn't necessarily use the right vocabulary. They helped me resolve that issue very quickly and painlessly. And I remember I asked this person on the phone when we were just about done, I said, I explained what had happened the time before, and I asked him if he was aware of any changes. Well, now, he said, we actually have a group that reviews those calls. They evaluate them, and our pay raises and our bonuses are based on those reviews. So it seems like to me, and maybe this is an oversimplification, I do think that it's possible that this is very expensive, but how do you compare the expense of resolving this issue with what it is costing in damage right now, as people's righteous indignation boils over into the streets in destroying property and causing harm there? I don't know how you compare that price, but I think the answer, or a part of the answer at least, could be with those body cams. Body cams controlled the feed itself and what happens with it by a third party, not the police department. It has to be outside of the police department. Definitely not the individual police officers, other than, I think, if there's a mistake on the camera or on the lens gets covered, this needs to come down harshly on the police officer or officers involved. If the equipment isn't faulty, then they need to be held accountable. And if we hold them accountable, they'll quit and they'll learn quickly that they have to comply. And then we review those videos. It's got to be just like those customer service calls for the IRS. Maybe in the beginning, it's got to be every time they interact with the public. I don't know. Maybe we identify over time those individuals that are having issues that are bad enough to be reviewed but not bad enough to be fired and or just completely eliminated from the process. We can identify those psychopaths in those moments when they lose control, so we get them out of those positions. Because I believe part of that is what's going on. I do believe that a lot of police officers don't act like that. But maybe I'm wrong. Let's make people accountable. Let's hold them accountable. Let's make this a better society. People shouldn't be afraid of being stopped by the police for running a red light or minor whatever, that they might have their lives terminated either because they're killed or because this simple thing is escalated by the police officer into an arrest where they actually end up being incarcerated. Even for one day, it is going to impact your life. But imagine if you go to jail or prison for a month or for the rest of your life over something that, I mean, it just boggles my mind that people have to live in a world like that. And it's time that we fix it. It's time. We can do it. We have the technology. We have the willpower. We have the resources. Let's do it. And maybe if that's not the solution, okay, but let's talk about it. Let's get this out in the open. Let's get these cameras going, recording, get this stuff in the light, in under a spotlight. So again, people aren't going to be able to continue doing what they've always done. And anyway, that's my 2 cents. I was going to write it out, but everything seems to be on video. And I appreciate your time, and thank you.